Welcome to another episode of Boom and Bust. I'm your host, Tony Clement. I am here at the News Forum where all voices matter. Well, with the force of Tropical Storm Fiona behind them, the Atlantic coast is looking ahead to challenges and opportunities. Joining us to discuss is Member of Parliament Rick Perkins, who was the Shadow Minister of Fisheries, Oceans, and the Canadian Coast Guard, just being appointed by Pierre Poilievre as the Shadow Minister for Innovation, Science, and Technology. Regardless, welcome to the program, Rick.
Great to be here, Tony.
Great to have you. First of all, love to get your sense of things in Nova Scotia and the other provinces on the Atlantic coast post Fiona. Tell us what you're hearing and what you've observed.
Yeah, it's a challenging time. We're used to hurricanes. In the last 20 years at my house alone, we've had four of them, and you get ready and prepared, but you're not ever totally ready for the aftermath of what happens because you don't know where it's going to come across on landfall and when it's going to do something. And in this case, we had a hurricane that came across in sort of northern mainland Nova Scotia, up around Canso and that area, which impacted Pictou County, Cumberland County, and parts of Cape Breton. And then as it roared across, it had wreaked devastation in PEI, and as we know, in southwest Newfoundland. And so the initial issues were to get power back on. In my case, we lost power for about 6 days, and the main part of the hurricane wasn't with us. We still have people in Nova Scotia and PEI now over 2 weeks from the hurricane that have still not received power. The immediate responsibilities and concerns that I have are deal with our number one issue or our number one industry in Atlantic Canada, which is the fishery. And we have a number of elements of critical infrastructure, the primary one being our wharfs. Hurricane Fiona impacted what are called small craft harbors. Those are federally managed wharfs and harbors. There's about 180 in the path through the provinces, including Ile de Madeleine and off the PEI, which is part of Quebec, and southeastern New Brunswick that were impacted. Over 100 of them have been damaged to the point where there's some operational challenges, and over 20 have been completely destroyed. So without that, that's our Trans-Canada Highway. So without that, we can't go fishing, and
Mhm.
that's going to be at least a $500 million rebuilding process.
Wow, that extensive. Okay, we're going to talk about infrastructure in a little bit too. I wanted to get your sense just on the immediate concerns. What's taking so long with the power being out for so long?
Well, if you haven't been to Atlantic Canada, you're probably not aware that Nova Scotia is primarily a big rock. Everyone refers to Newfoundland as the rock, but Nova Scotia is a big piece of granite with about 3 inches of dirt on it. So all of our power lines and all of our internet cable lines are all above ground on poles, and we have a lot of trees. And the wind blew them down at a time where the trees had a lot of leaves on them. We had record high winds in this hurricane, and they fall on the power lines. And on my little street of 30 houses alone, there were 40 trees on power lines. So you take that in the more remote houses that you get further up a mile or two up a road, being the only house with power lines and trees down, it takes quite a bit of time to get to them. That's why we call in the army. That's why the premier called in the army in a state of emergency. He requested 1,000 troops, and the federal government only provided half that.
Yeah, and we've got just about a minute left, but let's talk a little bit about the challenges moving forward. So restoring power, restoring the wharves. What else is on your list?
Then analyzing the impact on homes and businesses. A lot of homes aren't insured, so there's going to have to be relief programs for that. Roofs were ripped off. Businesses have had short-term disruption, but there's long-term. Our maple tree business and our forest sector is impacted greatly by the trees. So getting the analysis of that, and in the short term, there are some income loss issues in PEI in southern New Brunswick in the fishery because they were in the midst of the fishing season and now can no longer go out.
And that's still the case.
That's
They're
still
kind
the
of,
case.
yeah, they can't get
Yeah,
their boats
they
out.
can't get out. They lost their gear. They lost at least half their gear, and there's no gear to buy. There's supply chain shortages in just about every industry, including buying lobster traps, and they can't get out and get the gear even if we had millions of dollars for them.
Wow. We're going to return with our guest, Rick Perkins, Member of Parliament for South Shore, St. Margaret's in Nova Scotia. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.